online.com and on your smartphone. Welcome to A Life Lived Joyfully, brought to you by the Guadalupe Radio Network. Join us as we explore the call to holiness and the life of virtue. Here's your host, Monsignor Charles Pope.
And want to do kind of a news roundup again with you today. I've tried that in the past, and I hope that you will, certainly call and tell me some of your opinions with those things. On 877-757-9424, 877-757-9424. So I've got a number of different stories, and we'll talk a little bit about them each. And please feel free to call and tell me what you think as well. So with this in mind, the first story is that the John Paul II Shrine, which is here in D.C., features a lot of Marco Rupnik's artwork in this main chapel. Particularly, it's a lot. Just in fact, the walls are just covered from top to bottom, from the back of the church all the way forward to the front, with his very distinctive art, mosaic art mainly, with those big sort of alien eyes, if you know what I'm talking about. And I never liked it to begin with, artistically. But that said, I was apparently overruled. They didn't care what I thought when they decided to go ahead and put that in there. I did happen to know another artist, by the way, who made a bid when they were going to be decorating the chapel there, and he lost out. He would have done much more of a classical art. Well, next month is this month, or at least June. They're coming through here in a couple of weeks, and on the way to Indianapolis, a pilgrimage, and a Corpus Christi procession, if you will. And they're going to, at some point, stop at the John Paul II Center and for adoration and other maybe rest. And question is, should the artwork be covered up or not? Now, I'll tell you from the get-go, I have mixed feelings about it. I'll tell you why. One of the great artists of the church that I've always had a great appreciation for is Caravaggio. And Caravaggio was reprobate, without a doubt. He, in many ways, and I think that I would not support claims that we should go and cover up artwork that he has made or rip it out of churches. I would say there is a certain freshness to the wounds, however, with Father Marco Rupnik, and he's on no scale with Caravaggio. But I do say that I'm trying to think to myself through the principle that the art and the artwork, is it possible to admire the artwork of someone who is living, shall we say, not a morally, heroic life, to say the least, as Father Marco Rupnik allegedly has not. And I think that, we do this a lot in our life. We have a lot of actors and singers and other people whose music we listen to and share, and even, so on, dramatic actors and others. And we know behind the scenes they're not living good lives, and yet we make use of the artwork that they've done. So I think you want to be careful before you just say away with all this. We all can get very hot in the moment. The question is, what's a good principle in this matter? Because I'm no fan of his art, I wouldn't be upset if people covered it over or replaced it eventually. But I think I'd be careful before we do this. But you don't want to just hear what I think. Let's read on. hope you don't know the details. God bless you if you don't, but they are awful. Sacrilegious, just completely terrible things that he did with some of these religious sisters. Now, again, I'm not a court of law, and these are technically alleged, but the charges have not been denied, and so on. I think that what we need to do is we continue to question why he has any position at all, why he in Rome, why he hasn't been defrocked in some way. But at any rate, 30 religious sisters have raised these concerns with him. Now, they were not minors when he committed these atrocious acts, and they were still adults, but, relationship. And likewise, when the head of a religious community approaches one of the members, in this case some of the sisters, and as part of a spiritual direction situation, we see all kinds of things that that are going on, that it's just not, when a director asks a directee to do things, I think what we'll do, it's not an equal relationship. And so, as I say, I don't think, although they're not minors, and it wasn't criminal in that sense, it's horrifying, morally speaking. So what he's accused of, and the charges have not been denied, have been, in fact, deeply troubling. All right. Now, the John Paul II Shrine is sponsored by the Knights of Columbus as a fraternal organization and features mosaics by Pupnik in its Redemptor Hominis church, or it's a chapel, really. And it features the luminous mysteries. Now, also, there's a second chapel, the Luminous Mysteries Chapel. The shrine will serve as a stop on the National Pilgrimage Route. All right. Part of the U.S. Bishop's National Eucharistic Revival Initiative is taking place, and it'll be between June 7th and 9th. On June 8th, actually, the Eucharistic can. He lifted it, and for reasons unexplained, he's protecting Father Marco Pupnik. It's very, very, very troubling, the whole thing. And yet, it's going on, and these artworks remain there. So again, right now, the Knights of Columbus has said it was reconsidering the place of Pupnik's art in its organization's chapels. But of course, it's one thing to say that, but it's very expensive to remove or even to cover them. It's something that they're considering, and I would say I certainly understand the situation, that they need to in some way consider this. Again, the resolution called Pupnik's Mosaics repugnant to faith, morals, and Christian piety due to the fact that Father Pupnik reportedly perpetrated his sexual abuse through the creation of his artwork. So it's not just, it's just the artwork is separate from him. Apparently he even involved some of his sexual perversions in the making of his artwork. So again, the local chapters of the Knights of Columbus encouraged the executive leadership to make a public apology to Father Pupnik's survivors, so to speak, for the order's continued inaction in addressing these matters in the mosaic. And I think that's a little. This is a complicated question, as I try to at least set the table for you. I cannot tell you how awful it is. The real scandal here is that Pupnik is being kind of unharmed and left pretty well to tend to himself and continue on in his priestly functions inside the Vatican in Rome, and he's not being punished. Now, any other priest would have been suspended, immediately upon such charges, these things would be investigated, and only if it was clear that he was cleared of the charges would he be readmitted. And this is just not the way any other priest would get away with this. And it's is the freshness of the wounds, the freshness. The wounds are very fresh. It's still going on. It's still scandalous. This isn't about an artist who lived 500 years ago. Caravaggio is my example. And it's a very troubling situation in that sense. But I wonder if the principle shouldn't still apply that requiring every place where these artworks have been installed, and unfortunately they're very widespread. And I say that unfortunately for not just the moral crisis, but personally in my taste in art, which doesn't comport with, it just doesn't comport with Father Pupnik's kind of art style. But that said, that's a just as well, right? You know, had shall we say they were not piously at the communion rail between every brushstroke, praying the Divine Mercy. Well, that's archaic, but you know, they weren't there praying quietly at the altar rail between the strokes of their brushes. These things are part of human life. Actors, musicians, other artists, great singers, sometimes have questionable lives. They're passionate people. And they don't always live, you know, really good lives. So I don't know. I'd like to know what you think. Again, our number is 877-757-9424. And we're going to be taking a break in a few moments, but I do want to know what you think. And I do hope that our internet connection is going to improve here a bit. But again, for the record, the Knights of Columbus currently have no answer to give on this question and have largely been ignoring calls for the removal of, or at least covering over, of these artworks. Now, to cover over the work in the chapel, I've celebrated Mass in this chapel more than a few times. It's right here in the neighborhood. It's not that far from where I live, and right up next to the Basilica. I've had a number of events there, and it would mean to cover almost every wall in the chapel. It's just covered from top to bottom with these artworks, all the way around the back wall where the altar and tabernacle are, all the way around the side walls, all the way to the back, and there's also another chapel. And so for all these reasons, I think that it would certainly create kind of a barrenness in these chapels at the onset of just covering them. And then they'd have to, of course, identify benefactors or others. If they were to be removed, probably they'd just, I don't know, plaster over them, but what do I know? I think, and then another artist could put something in his place. As I said, I'm familiar with a number of the proposals that were made. I'm friendly, you know, I have good friendship with one of the artists who had proposed a different sort of plan for that chapel. But at the end of the day, I think the artist could be found, but it would also have to be, there's a lot of money involved, or tens of millions of dollars. So all of these are reasons I think that the Knights are going slow, and also maybe not wanting to get out ahead of Rome. But I do think that of all the scandals that have beset the current situation in Rome, this one is probably one of the worst. It's just awful what's going on with Father Marco Pupnik being protected in a way. It was hard to use any other word, protected by the Pope. Why is this? And what is it? Does he know things? What would happen if he were simply told, step back completely, disappear until this thing is adjudicated? It is said that the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, or I guess they're calling it now the Dicastery, is investigating these charges. Mhm. But I think most people see no evidence of that in Rome. And so, for all these things, we'll have to leave it at that. Our number is 877-757-9424. Again, 877-757-9424. And I hope to talk to you on the other side of the break.
Thank you for listening to the Guadalupe Radio Network and being part of the family. Families pray for each other. We would be honored if you would let us pray with you and for you. You don't even have to tell us your name. Just go to our website, grnonline.com, or call our prayer request line and leave us a message at 800-395-4008. That's 800-395-4008. We will be praying for you every day.
So the neighbor who we've spoken to, just in greeting, but who I don't believe has ever spoken back to us, out of the blue, surprised us. One day we were getting the kids in the car for Mass and asked us if we were going to Mass. I was dumbstruck for about probably 10 seconds. It was great that we had an opportunity to share about our parish and that we were Catholic. Turned out she was Catholic too, and she assumed we were because of the bumper sticker on our car.
The Guadalupe Radio Network. Radio for your soul.
Hello, I'm Steve Gleason, your Wednesday host for the weekly show called A Life Lived Joyfully. We explore the call to holiness and the life of virtue. Join Sarah Soto, Monsignor Pope, and myself as we dive into church teaching, sacred scripture, and practical ways to experience dramatic growth in our faith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Eastern. We'll watch for your questions and comments during the show. We'll be looking for you.
Welcome back to A Life Lived Joyfully on the Guadalupe Radio Network. Give us a call. The lines are open at 877-757-9424. That's 877-757-9424.
Okay, and we are back, and 877-757-9424 is our number. Now, we're having, like I said, some internet issues today, so we've got. I hope that this audio will be a little better, but it's more of an internet problem than a microphone issue. But we'll have to see. Okay, listen, God be with us. Now we do have a phone call, and we can caller. Are you able to hear me with all our problems here today?
Is that me?
Mm-hmm.
David?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I was just responding to your topic. If
Mm-hmm.
the Vatican has a lot of money, if they're actually protecting that particular priest artist, why doesn't the Vatican actually pay to have those paintings and artwork replaced?
Yeah. Well, there's certain flaws in your argument. First of all, the Vatican doesn't have a lot of money. They're in real trouble financially right now at the Vatican. I would say that they're not really, frankly, interested in the question of protecting his art. They're protecting him. And I think that's the big scandal. I don't think the Vatican has weighed in one way or the other about whether artwork by him should be suppressed. In fact, one of the complaints is that artwork is being used by him right now in some of their programs and things. So this is one of those things where I think we have to accept that this is something a lot of people don't want to comment on. So I don't know, Carla, what do you think?
I mean, I don't know what to think. I think
okay.
that if they're protecting him, it definitely needs to be looked at and addressed.
Yeah. I think we're certainly agreed on that. And as I say, I think it's going to have to unfold. But I think some steady pressure with a humility that we don't know all the facts. But I mean, they haven't really been denied either. If it's not true, then have it denied. or say that these are dubious charges and we're investigating them or whatever, but none of that's been done, and we're all left to kind of, for month after month after month, observe that he seems to be a pretty disreputable character, and he's being seemingly protected. And then secondary to that is the question of the artwork, and I think the best we can do is to say this is all terrible, every way you look at it, just terrible. All right, so I think that much we can agree on. So bless you for calling. Thanks. So I think also as we move on to another topic again, that I don't like to sit here as Mr. Judge and jury, but like anybody, I think at some point people ought to be able to to know more details about this, and that there really should be something forthcoming from the Pope. I was really disappointed in that 60 Minutes interview that nobody had a thought to ask him about that. She praised the Pope for being, no one has been more involved than you are with this, changing the Vatican policies about child sexual abuse. Well, first of all, Benedict was very, very involved, and heroically so, I think. But also, there are real glaring examples where it doesn't seem like Pope Francis. Again, it's like so many things with him. At one level, he talks very well and very strongly, and yet at another level, what's actually done is very vague and confusing. Okay, so it's kind of where we are. It's a struggle that I wish I didn't have to have, but it's nevertheless it's something that I think we're all dealing with. All right. Now, another story I wanted to look at, and again, I hope I don't sound like I'm picking on Pope Francis, but it was on the news, and I want to just maybe say a word about it. That apparently he allegedly told a group of priests that gossip is a woman's thing. As a man, I can tell you right now, well, us men do gossip too. But that said, again, I want to say regarding the Pope, he's sort of a man of his times. He's a man now who's in his 80s, and I'm sorry to say, I'm in my 60s, so I'm behind him by a good 20 years. But I have to say, sometimes we had these expressions and we said things like this more so when I was growing up than we do now. I do think somewhere in my own past, I certainly remember using that bad word he used recently regarding homosexual people with homosexual orientation that we won't repeat here. We talked about that last week. And now there's been this other, maybe we'll call it a slip of the tongue, where he mentions, women as a gossipy thing. We talked like that. I remember when I was a younger man, we tended to think of women as having certain qualities that men had, and there are certainly some of those things. But at the end of the day, gossip is a human problem. It just is. But so again, what do we have here? We have a very complicated man, and Pope Francis is what we do. And right now, if I can use this term, maybe the left wing is getting more scoured by this than the right wing. I've been subject of many, indirectly, of course, of many of his. He's very frank in his feelings about and thoughts about things, and he calls more traditionally minded priests like me kind of monsters, rigid. He's got all kinds of terrible things he has to say about us. And the traditional Catholics in general, the traditional Latin Mass Catholic, we've certainly suffered a lot. I mean, I love both forms of the Mass. Don't get me wrong, but I love them for different reasons. But the fact is that my goodness, we have been treated to some pretty awful things he said about traditional Catholics, and they're very sometimes personal. They're not even to the issue. They're labels and caricatures and things. And I know we did a lot more of this when I was younger, and there's been increasing pressure in our culture. And remember, we live in America. He has not lived here. He's lived in Argentina and Rome and a few other places, but at the end of the day, I don't know how things are there. But we tended a lot more when I was younger to engage in stereotypes, but there's been a lot of pressure over the decades not to engage in this type of talk, to avoid making stereotypical and ad hominem remarks and hurtful comments and things. I don't think that's the world the Pope lives in. I think he often talks like this. And right now, in this case, women in general as a group, and then also the people with same-sex attraction last week, and there's been some other remarks regarding abortion that even I wouldn't say. Like, abortion is like hiring a hitman to kill your baby. I mean, whoa. I mean, again, we were often had that trained out of us to talk like that. I do agree, to abort a child is to murder or kill a child, but I think also we have to stay sensitive to the fact that women often feel pushed and pressured, and sometimes they don't always know everything that is really going on, and they haven't had the kind of chance to see ultrasounds and things. So again, somewhere there, I wouldn't even speak that strongly, but pretty much across the board, he does. That's just kind of the way he is. So I think part of it is to say, well, sometimes when a man gets up into his 80s, you just say, well, that's the way father is. Well, you know how dad is. At some level, we have to just accept that people kind of get set in their ways. So I'm not here to excoriate the Pope. I think it's an unfortunate comment, but I hope that we'll also avoid the extreme of just becoming just tossing it back and shaking our fists and saying how dare he and different things like that. I think to say, well, this was an unfortunate remark. All right. So the full quote here is that, gossip is a woman's thing, he allegedly said. We men wear the trousers. We have to say things. We have to say things. Again, I don't even exactly know what that means. Yes, people like priests and other men in authority need to say things, I guess, but it doesn't mean we don't gossip, and there aren't things we don't need to say that we say all the time. So again, a collaborator with the group that he was, it says, Francis has previously denounced gossip in the church. He's described it as the devil's work and a plague, worse than COVID, worse than terrorism. So again, this is kind of how the Pope talks. I think here, I think gossip can be very damaging. Yes, I do, especially if it harms people's reputations, and we underestimate it. It's a very serious matter. But on the other hand, I do think that we also have a situation where we have, a kind of a Pope who sort of, speaks with a lot of hyperbole. Now, by the way, I'm sort of known for that. I preach colorfully. I don't use strange expressions like that. But I mean, nobody doubts what I mean when I say it. I don't use a lot of euphemisms and stuff. I kind of come out plain, and I say what I mean, and I mean what I say. I try not to say it mean. But at the end of the day, there are just times where we just have to use clear language. Well, that's a little different than some of these hurtful things that could be said, right? So again, the Vatican has chosen not to comment on this one, although it commented on some other things he is saying, as saying. And so again, the alleged remarks, the article goes on to say, are potentially another highly embarrassing incident for Francis, who's been trying to boost the morale of women in the church. On the other hand, he had to be very clear to the reporter on 60 Minutes, can a woman be ordained and put in holy orders? No. Well, what about a young girl who's her dream? Well, no, it can't be, it shouldn't be her dream. We all dream of things that we can't really reasonably do. Okay. So I think he's plain spoken at the doctrinal level at times when he needs to be. Less, there can also be times where some of us get very frustrated because he's not plain spoken, or he does things like, for example, it is alleged now that he's written the forward for James Martin's latest book. And that he, again, but here too, I have to get the facts on that case. I don't think it's a book about homosexuality. I think it's a book about raising Lazarus, if I'm not mistaken. But I think sometimes, it's puzzling that how can the same Pope who says abortion is like hiring a hitman to kill your baby, and then he invites and actually puts on the Pontifical Council for Life people who are virulently pro-abortion. It's like there's two men inside there. What are we to make of this? So a lot of us struggle with this and are puzzled. All right. And I'm a man under authority, and I have to be careful what I say and how I say it. But I can only say this, that he is certainly a complex figure, to say the least, a very complex figure. Now, with that in mind, we're going to be going to a break here in a moment, but I would like to know what you think. 877-757-9424. 877-757-9424. So with that in mind, we'll take a moment now. We'll take a break, and when we return, we'll look at some other stories in the news.
This is Life News Radio. I'm Jim Anderson. The U.S. Supreme Court is expected to release 2 abortion rulings this month. The Biden Justice Department is asking the court to use old hospital ER regulations to impose abortions in Idaho. And pro-life doctors are asking the court to end mail-order abortions and insist on a doctor's visit before receiving abortion pills. After flaunting court orders and denying civil rights specifically to pro-life employees, Southwest Airlines is in court seeking to defend their actions and appeal nearly $1 million in court-ordered payments over its past discrimination. The World Health Organization has released a new study demanding that adolescents need abortion, contraceptives, and matching education, all without parental consent or notification. This is Life News Radio. A Notre Dame Alumni Association wants the university to rescind its 2016 Laetare Medal given to then Vice President Biden. They say as president, he has become the most formidable adversary of the Catholic Church on abortion. Despite inconsistent reporting requirements among U.S. states, researchers at the Charlotte Lozier Institute say the vast majority of abortions are a form of birth control. The researchers say that the CDC should require more data from states. Arkansas is reporting 0 abortions in the state for last year. An abortion industry effort is underway to reverse all pro-life laws and allow unlimited abortion. And the firestorm of controversy unleashed at the comments from Harris and Butker in early May has developed interesting outcomes. First, Catholics, other Christians, and free speech advocates answered leftist critics of comments from the Kansas City Chiefs kicker at Benedictine College in Kansas. Now, however, a poll from Rasmussen shows double-digit margins of approval and even strong approval of his comments. For pro-life headlines delivered to your email address daily, sign up at lifenews.com. This has been Life News Radio.
Welcome back to A Life Lived Joyfully on the Guadalupe Radio Network. Give us a call. The lines are open at 877-757-9424. That's
877-757-9424. All right, and we are back, and I want to move to another story here, and that's regarding the so-called Pride Month. It's very frustrating to me. You know, we always held the month of June to be the month of the Sacred Heart, back when the church still had a lot of influence on culture, and now is, interestingly enough, here being named after a cardinal sin, namely pride. And I've been saying this for a long time. It's a very damning thing to take something which in the Bible is deemed by God to be a very serious sin, so serious that it cries to heaven for vengeance. Not the orientation, which a person has little control over, but the acts. And to take pride in it, not just to say, well, it's not that bad and you should emphasize other sins. It's saying this is something we take pride in. And I tell you right now, brothers and sisters, the thing I worry about most when it comes to people going to hell isn't the question of they fall through weakness and know how to get to confession. I have hope for people like that. Uh, my problem today is that there are so many people in this world defiantly saying no to God, being told that there's something in the Bible, and that's not just about LGBTQIA. It's about physician-assisted suicide. It's about abortion. It's about divorce and remarriage. It's about so many things about that today, because that's a quick ticket right to hell. Because God can't forgive people who don't want to be forgiven. I'll just illustrate it with you for a minute. If I came to you one day and said, "Oh, I forgive you for all the terrible things you said yesterday about me," and you would say, "Well, you might take offense at me for talking like that because you don't think that you said anything wrong yesterday. In fact, I probably needed to hear it." Something like that. So at the end of the day, I think somewhere we have to be, we have to be able to, um, aware, I guess, of our tendency to in some way, be, to in some way of, we have all kinds of trouble, I think, with, the title of this. And so I share Dr. Jordon Peterson's concerns. Let's read a few of his remarks here. This is again taken from his an interview that he had. But I'm also double checking my internet connection here. So give me just a minute to check my internet connection and see what we can do here. Yeah. Well, I'm in. Yeah. All right. All right. So continuing on with this, we have a Dr. Peterson's Dr. Jordon Peterson's remarks. It says here, Pride Month that occurs every June honors lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer people, along with everybody else who falls under the LGBTQIA plus umbrella. Peterson is an outspoken critic of these gender-affirming surgeries, and he calls sickening the annual celebration of sexuality that he feels is foisted or forced on people. And you have to endure it. People want you to engage, to study with it, all this stuff. He said that you should be very careful. You should be very careful that it says with what you name things. Pride is never a virtue, Peterson told Fox Digital. Pretty much all of it is a lie. And it's a dangerous lie, and it's a lie with real monsters hovering on the edges. Now, again, I think that I'll take a little bit of dispute with him here for a moment and say, look, we've got a situation here where sometimes the word pride in modern English can be used in a good way. That is to say, to what's wrong with our culture, which is that something which is repeatedly spoken of against in the scriptures. And again, let's go beyond LGBTQIA, other things, other big important moral issues today. All of these things are very, very excoriated in the scriptures, and we can't and to slap the word pride and say we're proud of this sort of stuff is really glaring. It is terrible, and he's exactly right about it, right? Uh, and so it says here that he goes on to say, pride is the cardinal sin. It is certainly that, and there's reason for it. Pride means, something like a stubborn refusal to change when evidence of error is accruing, and it's not a good thing. Amen to that. Amen. In fact, St. Thomas Aquinas says in the Summa that pride is our most serious sin, and so serious is pride that as a remedy, God permits, now he doesn't cause, but he permits other sins, particularly sins of the flesh, where people either drink too much and struggle with alcohol or gluttony, or they struggle with other addictions, or they struggle with sexuality. These things are very humiliating to us. And that's how serious pride is. God. Peterson said that people object to his point, by noting that the LGBTQIA LMNOP plus people simply want to affirm their identity, and they don't mean pride in the ways usually mentioned as a sin. Fair enough, I suppose, he said, to some degree, which was my point earlier, right? But that was the name that they chose, and that's the name that stuck, and that ought to give you some pause, right? So he goes on to say here, and I couldn't have say it better. Of course, he's very good at saying things. There's a real tinge of narcissism here, sexual narcissism, about the whole pride spectacle. Do people have the right to exercise their sexuality just the way they see fit? To some degree, I suppose, if it's a consensual thing among adults, but generally among human beings. Backwards to him, and it ought to be. It ought to be. Um, It's also the case, he said, that identity based on something as narrow as sexual desire, let's say, aren't identities at all. They're pronouncements of subjection to instinctual whims and passions and drives. Do you really want to be known? I will say, I think some of this started a little bit with alcoholism. They go to these AA meetings and say, hi, I'm John and I'm an alcoholic. Well, John, you're actually more than that. You're a son of God. You're a human being. Maybe you're a father. Maybe you're a architect. Are there other things you'd like to to simply put that out there? Now, in the context of an AA meeting, maybe so, but I think that tended to get into the culture a little bit, and people began to overly identify with certain pathologies or struggles or passions or desires, and yeah, you get pretty lost pretty quick, right? So pride has been around for decades, going back to 1969, the Stonewall riots, and in that period, an organization called GLAAD, GLAAD, a nonprofit organization focused on what's called today LGBTQ. Community rather than their critics. And so again, all of these are ways of saying that a lot of people feel that they're being pressured and forced and having this stuff pushed in their face, something that should be private, and talk to your your counselor, or talk to your therapist or clergyman or whatever you want to say, but at some level, um you've got to stop pressuring everybody. You see, you might as well call it gay pressure month. It's the gay pride month. All right, so again, I think that we're uh, I
I wanted to look more into some of the questions. What about purgatory? What about Mary? What about the saints? I, of course, came across Catholic answers. I was like, well, how can I listen to them? Like, I know they're online, but I mean, that's kind of annoying. Like, I want to just get in my car and listen to them. Like, oh, there's Catholic radio. And I wanted to learn more. I was like, I can't be in like a catechism class every hour of the day. It's like, be in the car, have it on radio, listen to things, and start learning more about the faith. It worked, and I'm Catholic now.
The Guadalupe Radio Network. Radio for your soul.
Listening to Catholic radio and getting excited about learning about your Catholic faith can be, well, infectious.
I converted in my 20s to Protestant, and this is the first time I've heard Catholic radio. I've been listening to it for a couple hours driving. First time I've ever heard Catholics actually excited about what they believe. I'm going to tell you what, this has been one of the greatest 2 hours that I've had in a while.
And a special thank you to our donors for keeping Catholic radio on the air. Thank you, and may God bless you.
It was somewhat of an accident, and I have a lot of windshield time driving for work, and usually I'm listening to my gospel music, and so I wanted to find something else different, and so I started scrolling. I found Guadalupe Radio. I started listening to it on a regular basis, and what I realized, had I found this station years ago, my conversion would have probably happened years ago.
The Guadalupe Radio Network. Radio for your soul.
Welcome back to A Life Lived Joyfully on the Guadalupe Radio Network. Give us a call. The lines are open at 877-757-9424. That's 877-757-9424.
All right, and we are back. And as I say, I apologize for any in and out of this internet we're having, but we'll carry on and do the best we can. And again, it's 877-757-9424. I get you. Don't you feel awful lot of pressure in this June period? To smile and celebrate. And of course, in school they really push this stuff on the kids. And I have several people in the parish who teach in public schools, and they say, "Oh yeah, they're forcing us to show these films, and we're all supposed to, say how wonderful this is," and on and on. It's just. There's no regard whatsoever for the fact that some of us, for sincerely held religious beliefs, think there's something wrong with celebrating this, and that we also have a situation where very often we have even just for personal sort of notions of discretion, that we don't want to be constantly discussing private matters that people do in the privacy of their life and make it a big public constant thing. And it's an awful lot of this just voyeurism and pressing this stuff out into public and things that we used to be discreet about. And so enough said. But again, Jordon Peterson is, he goes on here to say that the extremism of this movement has led to this transgenderism. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody who has a same-sex attraction supports gender-affirming surgeries and things on children. But at the end of the day, it's kind of emerged from this very sort of weird, wacky, gender fluid, make it up as you go kind of stuff. Even the so-called pride flag, I see about 8 or 9 different versions of it here in the article. It's just like it reinvents itself every 90 days. And so somewhere I think we can only sigh and say, that June is the month of the Sacred Heart. Can somebody please say amen? All right. On to another, and maybe the fourth story, which is that certain lawmakers are pressing Biden's EPA about the risk of the abortion pill to the water supply. Now, you may remember some years ago, and there is a lot of medical data and other types of data, scientific data to show that the huge amounts of contraception that get flushed into the river system here through our sewage plants and stuff, primarily the contraceptive pills that many women have been taking over the decades, have gone into the water supply and have had strange effects on aquatic life, and a lot of it seems to be traced back. And there are debates. I understand there's debates in all kinds of science, but it's not something to be just dismissed. These things have seemingly, there is good, strong evidence, scientific evidence, that this is affecting aquatic life, and who knows how it's affecting us as this stuff comes back to us in our drinking water, and that even men are now taking large doses, or not large, but I mean taking doses of some of this water that's still got some of these very strong contraceptive sort of medicines that have been flushed out into the system. Now, there's also then because the abortion pill has a very strong effect too on a woman's body. It is a very powerful drug meant to change her endocrine system, to flush out the life that's in her womb. It's a very tragic thing. It creates huge amounts of bleeding and then all sorts of things. And likewise, then even sadly, the remains of these little children are being flushed out into the system who've been killed by these drugs. So let me read you some of the article, and we'll make some comments as we go. This is from the a coalition of 10 federal lawmakers led by Senator Marco Rubio and a couple of others pressed the Biden administration about abortion-inducing drugs and the possible risk to the American water supply. We write, it says, in regard to the chemical abortion drug mifepristone and its potential side effects on our water system, the lawmakers said on Wednesday. And in a letter, given the steadily increasing rate of at-home chemical abortions, it is vital that the EPA ensure that these drugs, active metabolics in the blood and placenta tissue and the fetal remains of unborn children, all of which are unbelievably being flushed into America's wastewater system, do not pose a threat to the health and safety of both human beings and wildlife. The full impact of these medicines has not been sufficiently studied. Now, okay, look, at some level, you and I have sometimes found ourselves annoyed that every time something new comes along, you get the environmentalist groups that, it might affect some little slug thing that you never heard of in some wet water place. And, it's just alleged, there's no real studies to prove it, et cetera. But this is a pretty common tactic of the climate folks and those on the climatological left of center positions. And so there's sort of a taking up of the same approach. I have mixed feelings about that, but on the other hand, I mean, obviously, I have lots of reasons to not support the use of the abortion pill, including that it's killing, it's murdering a child. But as I say, look, we're all supposed to bow and be quiet and not say anything when the left says, "Hey, this could ruin the environment. We need to have more studies. We need an impact statement, an environmental impact statement." And these things sometimes cost tens of millions of dollars, and they go on and on for years before just a simple building can be put up somewhere. So this has been going on, and we're all supposed to bow our heads and say in reverence and say, "Well, these are good people. They mean well." And then all of a sudden, when this is tried, you get radio silence and you get pushback from the political left. And so again, it kind of goes both ways, doesn't it? It cuts both ways. Now it says here, when the FDA approved these drugs back as far back as 2000, it relied on a 1996 environmental assessment that failed to consider that human fetal remains would be making their way into our wastewater systems. The lawmakers went on to note, the American people deserve to know the negative effects caused by chemical abortion drugs and the sad inclusion of the remains of these embryos and fetuses that get flushed into the system. It's very tragic. Lawmakers asked the EPA to specify how it plans to ensure the safety of our waterways and to what extent the agency has studied the impact of these abortion pills on our country. And so again, of course, the usual suspects on the other side of the aisle are just accusing those on the right of just a lot of, using the environmentalists' own weapons against them. Yeah, that's right. That's what's being done. lose the life in the womb. A woman's body is designed to hold on to that life, to nourish it, to bring it to birth. And to wrest that from the body, one has to induce very serious medical conditions, heavy bleeding, lots of really heavy endocrinal, and the endocrine system has to be wrenched and wrung out, and lots of things have to go on. It's astonishing to me that these dangerous drugs can now just be distributed to some degree right over the counter. Unbelievable, just the danger. And then add to that now the possible danger to the environment.
A beacon of truth in a troubled world. This is the Guadalupe Radio Network, radio for your soul.